Well, thank you all for coming, for joining us tonight for Manga in America, How English Editions Are Born. Our panelists tonight are Ben Applegate, Director of Publishing at Penguin Random House for Kodansha Comics, Tania Biswas, Editor at Yen Press, Darren Bennett, Lecturer at AndWorld Design, and Ajani Oloye, another also a Manga Editor and Translator at Penguin Random House for Kodansha Comics. After the panel discussion, Darren and Ajani will give us a live demonstration of the translation, editing, and lettering process. But before we begin, I'd like to ask each of you to tell us just a little bit more about yourself. Maybe you could give a an idea of what you're most excited about in an upcoming title.
Ooh, cool. Should I start?
You start.
All right, great. Hi, I am as Allison said, the head of the editorial and production team for Kodansha Comics at Penguin Random House. So we produce basically all of Kodansha Comics' books in the States. And I am extremely excited about a number of titles this year. Thanks for mentioning that. You saw one of them flash by a little while earlier. Obviously, Akira is a huge manga. It started being published in a Kodansha magazine 35 years ago this year. And so to mark that occasion, we're publishing a box set of the entire series in a new edition, which is the first time it'll be available reading right to left in the original Japanese format in English. So that's very exciting. And the only other one I want to mention, especially for this group of people, I think, we published our first nonfiction manga this year called Ichi-F, which is a graphic memoir by someone who worked on the cleanup at the Fukushima nuclear power plant site. It's incredibly moving, intimate, and unique portrait of what it's like to be there. Oh, and there you go, right on cue. Really incredible singular book, so I encourage you to check it out.
I am Tania. I've been an editor I've been working for Yen Press for about 10 years. Pretty much ever since it started, I was the first minion. So I can do pretty much everything. I currently handle the majority of our freelancers, all of the letterers. And I work on series like Black Butler, Nozaki-kun, and so on and so forth, Horimiya. And in terms of what I'm really excited about this year, probably A Polar Bear in Love, which if you've heard of it, it's about a polar bear who falls in love with a seal. And the seal thinks he wants to eat him, basically. And also they're both boys, so that's an issue for the seal, but not so much for the polar bear. And that's going to be out in November 2017, so I hope you'll look forward to it.
Great.
Hi, my name is Darren Bennett. I've been working in manga for over 10 years now. It started off with Tokyo Pop and branched out to lettering for various companies, including Kodansha as well as Yen Press. Probably the thing I'm most excited about is just the continuing storyline in Fairy Tail. I handle the Simulpub each weekend, and it's just exciting to follow that story all the way through. It's something near and dear to my heart.
I'm Ajani, and I'm an editor at Kodansha Comics. And before that, I was a translator. I've been with Kodansha Comics for about 3 years. My first translation for manga was actually with Tokyo Pop, too, many years ago. And as far as things that I'm excited about, soonish I will start getting work on Battle Angel, which we recently announced. And I can't say too much, but maybe some upcoming seinen titles. I'm really into seinen, so I guess look forward to hopefully some announcements later on this year.
Sounds great. Thank you all for the great introductions. So, as we're thinking about how English editions are born, I guess I wanted to start by asking, anybody can jump in, but I was direct this question to Ben and Tania. Thinking about how do you or whoever it is who's making the decision decide to identify, or how do you identify and then decide which manga are going to be brought over into English and localized? So, I mean, obviously, Ben, you're working with Kodansha titles. And Tania, as I understand, you're acquiring from various other... everybody's excited about it.
Jun Mochizuki.
We get to look at manga behind your head while you're talking.
Meanwhile,
That's great.
I'm asking a question. No. So, but talking about, if you could talk a little bit about how you decide which, because as I understand it, Kodansha, there are many more titles that are in Japan that don't make it into English. So what is the selection process like?
You can go first.
Okay. So we're in a kind of a unique position because we work with Kodansha Comics, which is a fully owned subsidiary of Kodansha, which is Japan's largest trade publisher. Also publish a lot of manga. And they've been doing that for many, many, many decades. So as you said, there's a huge backlist of titles to choose from, as well as front list titles that are just starting. As a lot of you probably already know, manga in Japan is initially published in magazine form, so it's serialized chapter by chapter, and then before it's collected into trade paperback collections called tankobon in Japanese. Whereas in the United States, all we publish most of the time are those trade paperbacks, those collections.
Right.
So what we do is we keep track of all the new serializations. So every two times a month, we get almost every magazine Kodansha publishes, and we keep track of new series that are starting. We look at ongoing series that maybe are getting an anime, or that Kodansha has told us this series is getting more popular. We keep track of series that started strong, but maybe we want to see where the story is going. And all throughout this process, we're consulting with the sales team at Penguin Random House, because of course the US and Japanese markets are incredibly different, and what succeeds in Japan and what succeeds in the US, while it sometimes overlaps, often it doesn't. Just to give you a quick example of a title that Ajani was actually involved with, there's a wonderful horror manga artist named Junji Ito. Anybody? Yeah, okay, some Junji Ito fans in the audience. And his horror titles are legendary. We found the one work that he did for Kodansha, which was called Junji Ito's Cat Diary. Actually, Ajani found it. Yeah. And it is a semi-autobiographical manga about his girlfriend moving in and bringing her 2 cats with her. It is done in his horror manga style. It is wonderful. It did fine in Japan, but it wasn't something that was at the top of their list for something we have to bring over. We brought it out here, and it blew us away. I think we're on our 4th printing of it now.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
That's wonderful.
And when we talk about that at Kodansha, they always laugh about that because it really what appeals to different audiences. It's a really interesting thing. So we discuss it with sales, and then we end up making recommendations to Kodansha on what to license.
I see.
And they listen to our input. We discuss it with them. Of course, the final decision is up to Kodansha, but it's a very collaborative and fun process.
That's great.
So Yen works with a variety of different publishers, and the way it usually works is Jian Lee and Kurt Hassler are our kind of top 2 guys at Yen, and lady. Well, yeah.
Guy and lady.
Yeah, well, she'd like to be a guy anyway. She insists on being called Mr. But anyways, they're the contact people for the licensors. They go to Japan, they talk to the licensors directly. In terms of in-house, they're always open to hearing what we're excited about. So a lot of times, pretty much since the beginning when I started, it's been sort of like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, you have to look at this. And so I'll bring books to their desks and leave notes, and we can talk about it further. And a lot of times those books do end up getting licensed. Horimiya and Nozaki-kun are perfect examples of things I was super excited about. We talked about it, and down the line we did end up licensing them. In the beginning when we started out, we didn't have much of a reputation in terms of being a manga publisher because we were brand new.
So it was harder to get the license.
Well, it just meant we had to do a lot more legwork, I feel like. We had to really look at what was available and really pick and choose what would get our message across as a publishing company. And I think we did a really great job of that. One of our first publications was With the Light, which was a josei manga about an autistic child and his mother. And it's something no one had really put out. No one had put out material like that before. So we have a very selective way of looking at things, and I think our worldview in terms of manga is pretty broad. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. Yeah.
That's great. Actually, my next question is for Ajani, and I'm just going to skip over. I have plenty of questions for Darren, though.
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
but I wanted to ask. Well, you went from working as a translator, and then now you're an editor. And I guess, what did you learn about the process once you sort of went over to the other side? Did you?
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean, one big thing was just looking on the other side, getting to see what
Pulling back
happens.
the curtain.
Oh, yes, getting to see what happens and stuff. Because as a translator, I've done many kinds of translation, from manga to technical, just whatever has been out there. And it's always sometimes a mystery, like what happens once you send that in. Very rarely did I ever get back comments or edits or know what was going on, and didn't see the final piece until it was made into a book or paper or whatever.
So it's possible your translations were perfect.
No one's translations are perfect, especially mine. But now being on the other side, I know what happens with that, and I know that probably a big part of it is that people just don't have time to really like give you comments and things. That's been the biggest thing, the biggest difference between that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, your description when I introduced you was that you still have a title as a manga translator. So are you? I mean, do you do any in-house translation as an editor at Kodansha?
Yeah, because as I mentioned a little bit like of time constraints. I don't always have time to ask the translator, like, hey, you forgot to translate this part. Or if I got a book and there was an extra part in the manga that somehow wasn't included in the files that we got originally, I can't just give it back to them. And I, occasionally step in to translate things. So to a certain capacity, yes.
Okay. And do you sometimes miss all that work as a translator? Or is it a whole different kind of...
To be honest, there are times where I'm really interested in language in general, and I like Japanese. And the type of translation that I did, not only in manga, but also I did a lot of technical and scientific papers and things. It was always interesting to see what's like happening out in the world and to learn new things. It was just an excuse to learn while I'm working and getting paid for that. So. I do appreciate that. But with manga, too, what I'm doing now, I still get that. As I'm editing things or as I direct to translation, I'm learning new things every day. So,
So Darren, so you work with, as I understand, you work with manga in translation, but you also work with works that are originally in English.
Yes.
And so, I mean, can you talk a little bit about some of the differences between working with something that's, original versus something that is already sort of set?
The biggest difference, I think, is there's an established style with the manga that I work on. I'm having to, maintain the integrity of the original book. So I'm picking styles and fonts, and all of the lettering choices that I make in a manga would be something that I'm deriving from the book itself. Whereas if I'm doing a Western comics, I'm making those choices myself and establishing the style there. So that's probably the biggest difference. Also, with U.S. comics that I'm working on, there's more collaboration between the different facets, where there's the colorist or the writer. Whereas with manga, it's just between myself and the editor, which is collaboration in itself, but it's a different variety there.
It's not as generative. Like, do you feel more? Working with an original. A work as it's being generated, do you feel more freedom, or is it like, what you're doing is somewhat interpretive as well when you're working with manga, so.
I think there's different outlets of creativity with both. With manga, of course, like I said, I'm trying to maintain that integrity, but so there's a balance that I have to strike, and I find it pretty fun to do that. As well as if there's retouch involved, just recreating some of the art that's in there. There's a lot of different technique that goes into that is really, you have to be creative in some facets there as well. But definitely, when I'm generating my own, designs and everything for the Western comics, there's a little bit more generic or organic, I should say, creative process there.
Well, so we recently, well, not recently, you mentioned, Ben and Tanya, or I'm not sure which one of you mentioned this before we were talking, that American readers tend to come to manga from anime, which is sort of the reverse of how it is in Japan. And why do you think that is, or how do you think that?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, that's like a whole book probably to answer that question, but
well, in about 2 minutes, how would you?
I think anime here made inroads here before manga did. That's pretty much in a nutshell. And nowadays, with streaming shows that are coming out, being simulcast, it's almost kind of like a focus group for manga. So in a lot of ways, you like, for example, I might be excited about Title X, but it's like, well, this could do okay, but we're not sure. We're not sure if we want to make the leap yet. And then the anime comes out, and it's here right away.
I see.
And then there's a huge reaction to it that tells us, wow, okay, we were on the right track. We're going to go ahead with
sort of
this
follow
kind of thing.
where the other media.
I feel like
lead.
anime is immediately available right now. It wasn't always, but people found their ways. And
the anime creators, they don't have a problem with sort of taking the lead on which licenses, or do they?
Well, they don't really, in terms of anime creators,
any input,
they don't really have any say into what we're licensing, but it's sort of like, because Japan
Do you think that they're ever like, whoa, well, let's let the manga come first?
well, there's a lot of respect for the manga among
yeah.
people producing the anime, but often usually that's a separate corporate entity, actually. Like there's an anime production committee that gets assembled to create an animated show. And we bump into some problems sometimes because sometimes the merchandise licenses are available for the anime and not for the manga. So if we want to create a promo item, we bump up against that kind of obstacle. But I mean, I think that one of the huge reasons is, as I mentioned earlier, in Japan, people read manga on trains, in a magazine, or on their phone.
And the serialization.
And that culture really doesn't exist here, that kind of comics reading culture. So that's a huge stumbling block.
It does somewhat.
Well, yeah. But the culture of taking the train to school, buying a manga at the bookstore in the train station and reading it really doesn't exist in the United States.
We don't have bookstores and train stations, or not many train stations anymore.
As a huge Amtrak fan, I'm very sad.
Well, I mean, so Tanya, you somewhat touched upon, you were talking about simulcast, but we also talked about simulpub and I mean, how the impact that has had on the industry here. So,
well, that was just something we, as publishers, I feel like we had to do because there was content that was being disseminated for free, and that was unfair to the publishers in Japan, to the creators, to the editors. And so we finally managed to do simulpubs. And Black Butler is one of ours, Attack on Titan is one of Kodansha's. But that's definitely direction we are looking to expand on and do more of, just because everyone is hungry for the material. And there's no reason to keep them waiting if we can find a way around it,
And you feel like it really does sort of build demand for?
Honestly, fans out there know what they want to read a lot sooner than publishers do. So it's our job to fill that demand and make sure we're putting it out in a way that the material out in a way that's accessible to fans and still, returning royalties and, paying the creator for the work they've done.
Right.
So.
Well, so how do you interact with the fans? I mean, how are you able to interact with fans, or how much sort of, is there ever any input? Is there ever,
Well, I mean, we all go to conventions. I think in terms of meeting people one-on-one, conventions and events like this one are the biggest. Just, doing your shift at the publisher booth and getting to talk to people who walk up dressed as the characters in the books on your table. That's a big one. I had a really interesting experience because I was an editor before I had this position. I edited a series called Number 6. That's so good. But that series, the fandom was very, very enthusiastic and incredibly passionate about the material, and it existed before we had even started publishing.
Right, well, so that's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
I guess, more, obviously there's the response from titles that you're, series that you're publishing, but what about, is there ever, a fan, from the fans, you recognize that there's a need for something, and does that?
They're yes and no. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in and say this, going back to like the simulcasts, because it sort of acts as like a focus group. There are people who are like, oh my gosh, I have to have this title. So it's not that, this person said we need this title and we pick it up. It's more like these are things we've already been considering, but if there's a huge fan reaction, we do listen to you guys, How could we not?
Yeah. I mean, we're on Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, all these places, and we don't respond to everything that we receive. If you email us and ask, hey, license please this title X, we're obviously not going to say no or yes to you, but we do read every single message we receive. And they really do matter.
Yes.
Princess Jellyfish is one where, we were trying to figure out how to make that title work in the U.S. market for a very long time, and the constant drumbeat of fans asking for that to come out in English helped us figure that out and bring it out, and now it's a big hit. So.
Great.
And we licensed recently the saga of Tanya the Evil. But for 6 months on social media, that was all fans were requesting. It was the most requested title for 6 whole months on social media. So how could we not pick it up? So.
Well, I do have more questions, but we do need to move along to the live demonstration.
To the scary part.
See if we can pull it off.
So I guess that's me. It's time to go.
So we will have a live demonstration, which will be, we'll have commentary as it's going on, and then we will be able to open up questions to the audience. So if you can think of questions at the moment.
Okay, sorry.
So what we're going to do now is Ajani is going to translate 2 pages of manga. And we're just going to try to show you what happens to take a book in Japanese and turn it into a book that you would buy in the bookstore and read.
Cool.
There's 3 stages in this process, generally: translating, editing, and lettering. And we're going to take you through all of them. Ajani is going to translate 2 pages. I'm going to edit them. Like you said, I'm sure they're going to be perfect, so I'll have nothing to do. And then Darren is going to step in and do the lettering. So,
yeah.
Oh,
there's your.
you're going to be able to see the whole thing.
Okay.
The book that we've chosen is Fairy Tale Laxus. This is not a book that we have licensed, so don't go on Amazon and pre-order it because you can't. But we wanted to be daring and go with pages that none of us had seen before today.
That's daring. That's daring.
So you're gonna see if you see us make a little mistake or change our minds while we're doing it, it's because we're really showing you the real process as it happens. Yeah.
Okay.
Please be
So,
be a little bit forgiving.
I should start off by saying I'm not an interpreter. I'm a translator, so I may be a little slow at this. So these are the pages that we have. We have 2 pages from this. And first, I guess I'd like to kind of start out by saying like some tools and things that I recommend or that I use as a translator. I feel it's essential for me to have a reference materials. So I have a pocket dictionary that is always handy for me. I mean, of course, we can use online dictionaries and stuff too, and I recommend like Weblio, or I heard gshow.org is pretty good. But this is just handy just to have, just like one thing just to always go to instead of having to go through web pages and stuff. And then particularly for comics or for manga, this is the Nihongo Onomatopoeia Jiten. It's a dictionary of onomatopoeia, which is very, very important in manga. And Japanese, and I believe Korean too, use onomatopoeia much more frequently in like everyday speech and things like that. And it's important to have something like this to kind of figure it all out, because most of it doesn't really, it's not equal to the same thing in English. All right, so usually I use Word, but today, due to some technical difficulties, going to just go in InDesign so that when we're done, we're just going to go straight into that. So we have the page here, and one of the first things that we're doing is setting up the script. And I'm going to put down the page numbers here. We format scripts by putting the page number and panel numbers. So I have the 2 pages here, 168, 169. And then I have on this page 168, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 panels. So 168.1 is panel 1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, and 0.6. And the way that I would do it to start is the script serves as reference for the letterer. And I'm trying to do whatever I can to make sure that it's clear to the letterer what goes where and who's speaking and things. So this first panel here has him saying, "Anatoki irai da na," and "Koshite tatakau no wa," and the exclamation marks there. This character, his name is Laxus, so I will get that there.
Hey, that's the name of the manga.
Yeah. What do you know? So I'm putting down his name there, and let me get this over here. I have the 2 things that he's saying. So Anatoki irai da na, like since that time, something like that. I haven't read the manga too. There's a lot that goes with like context. So knowing what he's talking about, I'd probably go back and kind of figure out what Anotoki means, because this happens a lot where there is.
We're all judging you silently. Don't worry. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, this would definitely need to be. This is what an editor is for. So it's been. So actually, it's backwards in that case. It's been. We haven't fought since that time, right? Something like that. So maybe instead of since that time, like something like it's been so long, and then in the next one, since we last battled or whatever. So, sorry, that's just me. I don't mean to be whatever about that, but it's live. We're live.
Yeah,
guys.
we're live. Keep it going. Keep it going.
Yeah. All right. Okay, panel 2, nothing's happening. Oops. So we can leave that there, or we can just erase that and go to the next one. Panel 3, there's a sound effect. So I put something to show that this is a sound effect. It's effects, and it's saying "hyo," which is just probably her, pointing the foil there, and so like a swish, maybe. Something like that.
This is all very scientific.
Yeah. No, actually, so after doing this for a long time, you kind of fall into, you can fall into patterns, but you kind of figure out how things work and try to make equivalent things. I read comics when I was a kid, so I can understand that maybe, do doesn't sound like, or don or something like that doesn't sound like anything to me, like an explosion, but it is. But from reading comics, I would say that's like boom or kaboom or something.
Ajani,
Okay.
when do you, for sound effects, do you like keep a glossary for a particular, for a series, or so that you're sort of using the same sound effects for the same translation?
We try to. There's sometimes it can be kind of overwhelming, and because of timing and stuff like that, we can't always do that. But for certain series, we have some translators that have actually kept a glossary of all of the sound effects they've used in like all their series, which is incredible for us. But yeah, of course, in my mind, I kind of have like a running glossary of things that I can use. But it really depends on the series. Some series don't really need that. And it also, the sound effects can change wildly across different series too. So
I was just going to say that the same romanization in Japanese can mean many different things too.
Right.
So it's really a matter of context.
Right, but so I guess that's why when I was working, when I've worked on manga in the past, like that's just how I like to work personally. I like to have a consistency over for a particular if it's the same creator, then.
But even then, the sound effects can mean different things. So it's not always one-to-one.
The one that trips people up the most, in my experience, is ka.
yes.
Because that can mean flash.
Glint.
It can, glint. It can also be blush. If a
Or
character's blushing.
click, if it's a
yeah,
heel.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
it's never exactly one-to-one,
No.
right?
It's
You would
never
think,
exactly.
but you would have like, well, I've used this one before for this, and so.
And there are some series where a specific sound effect recurs over and over and over again, and you really have to have a
You have to
standardized
have a
translation
variety,
for it,
yeah.
or you're in trouble.
Right.
Like in Attack on Titan, especially in the early chapters, Zushin appears over and over and over again. That's the not sound of Titans, tromping. So it's an important ominous sound. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Ajani, you wanna jump
sorry,
in?
just continuing. So I put, going on Laxus is exclamation mark, so just keep the same exclamation mark. Then there's a character who I don't know who this character is, so I put just mask for now until I figure out who that is. And he's saying line formation, so line formation. And then there's a girl here. I also don't know where she is, so I just put girl. And the Japanese here says Yosei Kiju Reburahon. I don't know what Leverahorn is. Have you seen this before? Leverahorn? Leprechaun.
We should do all our manga translations here.
This is great. Okay, but Yosei Kiju would be like a fairy machine gun. Oh, sorry, not fair. Fairy machine gun.
A fair machine gun.
Fairy machine gun. And was it?
Lever.
It is leprechaun? Really? Okay.
I think it actually is.
Oh, really? Okay. Sorry, I'm bad at spelling here. It's a leprechaun. I'm just gonna write it and then excuse my bad spelling.
That's what
I'm really
editors are
nervous
for.
too. So
Yeah.
okay, so on to the next page. So 169.1 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 again. Okay. So we have on this first page, this first panel. Oh, sorry, you're not seeing that. Let me get them over here. Oh, there you go. So we have this here. It's sound effects, do 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 do, which is basically like a booming kind of sound. So let's put the SFX. Boom, 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 boom. I could put boom times 5 or something like that. But we put the sound of just to differentiate things. We put sound effects in all caps. And then Laxus here is saying ch. So we can put something like crap or damn or something like that, but it's kind of common just to put like ch like that and spell like that. Then the next part, Renke ga hai. Renke is not a word that I'm super familiar with. I'm just guessing it means something like it's in quick succession or something. But I'm going to double check that because being a good translator means that you doubt yourself all the time. No, I'm absolutely serious. Because for me as an editor, that's one of the problems that I've had, where people sometimes are very confident about their Japanese and think they understand something, especially for like, false friends or something like that, where it's just in katakana, where they have like a word that it sounds like it should be this in English, but it's not, like consento or something like that, which is a plug, but it's not consent. So
Power outlet.
a power outlet.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So in my dictionary here, Renke, connection, coordination, team. Oh. Okay. So I guess good coordination or good teamwork in this case. Again, this is a context-heavy thing. I think I would kind of have to read the rest of it to kind of figure it out. But and if I'm wrong, let me know.
Direct complaints to Yen Press, care of Tania
I think
Biswas.
not.
I think I just closed something I wasn't supposed to, right?
Did you close this in preview?
It's in.
You close.
Oh,
Pull
there
that
you
up.
go.
Go to the second page.
Yeah,
There you go.
is,
There you
yeah.
go. Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, then the next part says, 愛されてるからこそ手なしか. So this is, before anything, it looks like it's a thought bubble, and what we do for thought bubbles is we put it in italics. Is that still Alexis? Well, I guess it is. Oh, this is not the normal one, so I have to do this. It's maybe
Now, most of our translators are freelancers,
Yeah.
which is not. I think that system is not used by everybody. I know that Vertical, which is another manga publisher in New York, actually has some in-house translators and designers. All of our translators and letterers are freelancers. So,
Do you want to talk
Like
a little
they're-
bit about how you find such talent?
sure. I mean, at this point, a lot of the people we work with are people we've been working with for many, many years. People like Darren, who you'll notice is the only person on this stage who has worked on everything that we have talked about. So the really good people who can turn in high quality work on time, every time, are extraordinarily valuable.
It's a very small pool.
It's an extremely small pool.
So when you find one, even if they're not 100% perfect, you make sure you hang on to them and train them, because you're not going to find that many that quickly, especially with our publishing schedules. So.
Right.
Well, would you have advice for people who are looking to break in or emerging or trying to? What's the best way to start?
Great question.
You can go first.
I guess it depends on whether you want to be a letterer or a translator.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, if you want to be a translator, the first piece of advice I'd have is watch a lot of movies and live in Japan.
Well, and I'll also be honest, just because you can translate Japanese into English doesn't mean you can be a manga translator. You have to be able to write in English. That's actually, in my opinion, that's actually more important. Because if you make one or two translation errors, the editor is there and they can catch them. But if you have the art to back up the English that's going into the manga page, that's huge. Totally huge. So make sure you read not just Japanese manga, Japanese books, watch Japanese things, but read everything. Everything you can get your hands on. Internet, newspaper, magazines, Western comics, everything. It's hugely important.
Because there are a lot of also references. They're drawing upon this long tradition. Do you feel like that also
No,
helps?
it's just learn how language can be used. Not everybody has that interest, like just from the get-go. Personally, I did. So it's not something I had to develop. I was just hungry to read everything I could. But I do feel like the more you read, the more you learn what you can do with words. And that's really important.
Well, I've always say, I mean, I work as a literary translator and I work mostly with prose. So in my opinion, I've always said something similar, that what's most important is that you're able to write well in your native language, because that's just the most important. Obviously a facility with the language that you're translating from, but there are many. I mean, poetry translators. Many people work. They work in collaboration. But if you're working on a poem, you need to have the skill to put it into the form.
And also read comics, because following the flow of a comic book is very different from following flow in any other kind of text. So, and manga is in and of itself very different, but just reading all the comics you can find really kind of gets you into the right mindset, I feel like.
And something we didn't talk about, when Ajani made that choice very naturally to split that line across two balloons in the first panel, we haven't said this about him, but he also draws his own comics sometimes.
He's pretty awesome. You should check his work out.
And so, he has this intuitive idea of how a comic should read, and that's a fantastic
You don't need to be
point.
an artist, but you definitely need to have a love of comics. So, and in terms of lettering, get really familiar with Adobe Creative Suite. Because in the beginning, when manga was coming out here in the manga boom in the early 2000s, most manga companies lettered right in Photoshop. So they would just put the text right in Photoshop, but it's not maneuverable. You can't manipulate it very easily. So now, it's relatively a recent development, but everyone's starting to use InDesign a lot more. So learn InDesign, learn Illustrator, learn Photoshop, and that will at least help you get your foot in the door. And don't be scared. I know these programs are super like overwhelming sometimes, but don't be scared to like play around in them, because that's how I learned. You think I knew all of these programs when I started my job?
I didn't take a
Heck
course.
no,
Yeah, exactly.
I literally
Yeah.
did not.
Yeah.
I took
So
a course.
But you can figure it out, and don't be afraid to ask questions and look on the internet for advice and figure it out yourself.
Well, I'm actually done, so maybe we can kind of turn over. Before I go, just explain a few quick things that I did here. So on this some other things that I did that you may wonder why I did that. Oh, one is I made a mistake actually right here. But so we want to make sure that the letter understands where certain things are coming from, and like so we have who's speaking, but even for the sound effects on this one that we had here on the sorry for the okay, on this third panel here that has like a sword that is saying beep 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 beep, and then this person is coming through that's gyua, and sorry for my bad acting, but kind of boyomi. But so there might be a case where someone looks at this and be like, okay, so you wrote that this is this and this is that, but wait, which is which actually? Is this the BBBP? Because they don't, in many cases, the letter doesn't speak Japanese. It helps if they can, of course, but it's not necessary. So I made sure on here to put that the stabbing kind of quick succession there is from the sword, and put it in little brackets here. And then another thing that we do is when things are bolded, if it's necessary, in this case, he's yelling this out. This is "Anta wa mura o mamoru no ni senden shiro," and that part I underline to make sure that it will be bolded when it's in the lettered version of this. Okay, so I'm done. Thank you for putting up with me.
Editor, take it away.
Anything else?
This is going to be real short, like
Oh.
I said, but yeah.
So,
All right. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So the next part of the process typically is the editor receives the script and will look at the Japanese, look at the English translation, and do an edit. This can be a really laborious process if it's a complex book. Fortunately, this is fairy tale, so it's just fun. I'm saying it's not about a nuclear plant. That's all I'm saying. Something Ajani was saying, by the way, about indicating where stuff is on the page. For EGF and for pages with or books with a lot of diagrams in them, we will sometimes even put numbers on a JPEG to indicate to the letterer where individual pieces of text go, because otherwise it can get ridiculous.
Yeah, actually, when I was at Tokyo, when I worked for Tokyo Popular Translator, they had me make sure to actually write number every panel. When I had to get the book, write it on the panels, and then send it back to them so that they had reference.
Now, I don't like the word battled, so I'm going to change it to, it's been so long since we fought like this. And I'm going to add in the ellipsis and the 2 exclamation points at the end of that. I guess I'll bring the first page back here. This is the fun part because you get to just judge people and not do any of the actual work. No, that's not true at all. Okay. So Laxus here, swish, that's a good choice for the sound effect. And then he included the exclamation point. Oops. Line formation. Oh dear, I'm ruining everything. Line formation, yeah, that's pretty clear. That's in katakana, so actually it's unquestionably correct in this case, because it's not power outlet. Lebrahorn, I'm going to spell that right. Just pretend that I'm spelling it right. And I guess I could check the spelling of leprechaun.
This is what spell check is for.
If you wanted me to.
It's E, right?
This is not glamorous. There's not it's not all easy. Good old
It's me,
Google.
dude. It's me.
Let's do it. Now, We don't always have the time, or some editors don't like doing this script edit before they actually send the script to the letterer. Sometimes they will have the, oops, what the heck is that? Sometimes they will actually have the letterer do the lettering with the dialogue unedited. And, oh, it's an E. Wow, nobody saw that coming.
Three of us did, dude.
All right, fine. Okay, so that's a good choice. And then I'm going to go in and make sure he got all the booms. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 booms. Yep, that's 5 booms. That's some quick coordination.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about exactly. So. Oh,
I think you probably got it. But this is a good opportunity for me to show off one of my other cheat sheets online, which is ALC. Now, this is a database of sample sentences, which is extremely useful if you need to see how something is used. One of the unique things about translating manga versus translating prose, literature, well, I guess prose literature is true, but versus doing like technical translation or product descriptions or that sort of thing, is that you're dealing with a ton of dialogue. And so when Tania was saying earlier that writing is super important, you also need to read a variety of stuff, because if you're translating a book that's about a high school romance, you need to know how teenagers talk.
Yep.
You might be able to read all the Japanese words on the page. You might even be able to write, a paper about, I don't know, North Korean politics or something. But if you don't know how a teenager talks, you can't translate "say I love you." It's just not going to be possible for you.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I guess ALC is not wanting to load for
I'm
me.
not sure
so we
ALC
might skip
actually
this
works
part.
anymore, Ben.
It
Yeah.
does.
It does?
Yeah.
It does.
I tried looking it
I
up
used
and
it
it wasn't
yesterday.
Weird. Good to know. I'm glad.
Anyway, we'll wait for that to load.
Just
But
not in here.
But ALC uses Eijiro. That's their main dictionary that they use, which is a very useful dictionary.
whatever. All right. No, not whatever to what Ajani said. Whatever to this is not loading. Ah, there we go.
There we go.
Resolved. Yay.
So,
That's the Eijiro on the web.
oh, this is Darren's computer. I'm not
Oh,
gonna
it
be able
has
to,
it.
I'm not gonna be able to type in Japanese.
Got
Forget
it.
it. All right. So anyway, I would go on ALC, and type that in. And the great thing about ALC is that I can type in a word, and I get a long string of sentences where that word is actually used, and then the English equivalent of that sentence, translation of that sentence. And the wonderful thing about that is that, of course, a lot of words get used in multiple senses, so you can see how they're used. So he's not holding back because he's being controlled. All right. Now, if I was actually editing this book, I would know what he's talking about. Again, because of context, but I don't. So, are you okay? This is nothing. Mondene. So that's good. This is a little less formal. So Ajani translated it as less formal. This is nothing. But this last line here, "Anta wa mura o mamoru ni sennen shiro." I think this is a little bit dry for me because shiro is more of a informal way of speaking, and laxus is kind of a prickly, like a more rough kind of dude. So you all focus on protecting the village. There we go. So I'm going to drop the G again, following Ajani's cue from earlier. All right. That's that.
All right.
And Darren, you want to come over? It's not deserved at all, but thank you very much.
All right. So now comes the magic.
You're not kidding. This is the cool part.
Usually this will be in a text editing program, as Ajani mentioned, and we'd be able to copy paste from there, but since we're right here in InDesign, I'll be using this. I have the pages laid out. We dropped them in already, where I would take a look at the original Japanese tankobon and kind of place it in the same positioning. Like I mentioned earlier, everything's about maintaining the integrity of the original, so that you guys can enjoy it in this same style as its original format. Okay, so
Oh, hey, Darren.
yes, sir.
You put an exclamation point after leprechaun, if you would.
Okay.
I meant to
Bad
do
editor.
that. I forgot.
All right. We'll
Awesome.
get there.
Thank you.
Always editing.
So,
Can't stop yourself.
for lettering, I use different paragraph styles and character styles. This makes it a bunch easier to remember, different fonts that I'm using, whether it's different sound effects or the main dialogue font or attacks, different things like that. So for main, I'm just going to use yada, yada, yada. And that'll format the font to the way I need it. And basically now it's just copy pasting that text and placing it inside of the balloons there. As mentioned, it's good to get familiar with the different Adobe programs. This lettering manga typically takes place in InDesign or some sort of layout program like this. As mentioned, it used to be a Photoshop ordeal. If you're lettering Western comics, that'll be done in something like Illustrator. So there's a lot of different tools to use. And so you definitely want to familiarize yourself if you're interested in lettering with all the various tools. So we'll use sound effect fonts here. I have quick keys, but I don't want to do something where you guys don't exactly see what I'm using. And so I'll do the sound effect in the same, or at least a close enough style as the original here. Kind of make it white. I have screen tones that I can fill it with, or if I'm just using like grayscale to match the color tone there. But I do have tones that I end up using. In my tones folder, I'd have all the different things you need from the comics catalog. We have dot tones, things like that I drop in. But since I'm in a rush here, I'm just going to use the grayscale. Placement I usually place, pretty close to the original, and I don't want to obscure the art in any way, so I'm not going to, cover up anything. I'm just going to basically subtitle it. And that's one of the different things with different publishers. You'll find that different publishers have methods of subtitling their sound effects or not even translating in some cases. Where are we?
To speak for Kodansha, we want to have a translation of the sound effects. It really depends on the sound effects sometimes, but we just make sure to always keep that. I don't want to put it, but just we want to make it look like it's actually part of the comic and keep it in the style, and then also basically subtitle it for yeah.
And there's different justifications for different ways of doing this. I mean, this is a choice that we make that's actually in our style guide that is used by all of our letterers. Yeah. So we have a style guide for translators and a style guide for letterers that they receive that has direction on these sorts of issues. What kind of, from like how the sound effects should be lettered, big stuff like that, down to small things like the fact that we use the serif capital I for the personal pronoun, but the non-serif capital I in all other usages, which is a rule adopted by a lot of American comics publishers, but not universally across the manga industry. So it's an interesting little thing. And every publisher has different ways that they like to do these things.
Another thing that's typical for American comics that we try to do is not always like that is the way that having the regular text in all caps. I think Fairy Tail is an exception to that.
Yeah,
right.
But typically we have it all caps.
Fairy Tail's been coming out in English for 7 years. So there were certain things that were grandfathered in on Fairy Tail that we don't do for our other series. The Case is one of them.
Right.
So I think you mentioned that, so you Kodansha edits the scripts before they're lettered, and Tanya, I think you said that
Yeah.
Yen does it.
Yen will, as Darren was it Darren or you? I don't remember. Oh, it was Ben. I'm sorry. But as Ben mentioned, we do actually send everything raw to the letterer and get them to put in the text because, and the idea behind that is that it's very important to see how the text plays out on the page
Before you
and
edit.
with what kind of space you have, because sometimes you can't actually gauge that by the eye. So it helps to, when you're not, because you could be really flowery in an edit and then get to the letter, it'll get to the letterer and they'll be like, what the heck do I do with this? So having them put in the text and then working on that, it allows us to read the art and, sort of gauge the art. And it also lets us, I forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, it just gives you a better, I think, a more a reading experience and an editing experience more closer to what the reader is going to go through, So yeah.
And Darren, does that affect do you like being edited once you've already lettered something, or do you?
That's a no.
Yeah, edits are. I mean,
Well,
they're part of the job.
Sometimes you get scripts that are, you're like, this just is not going to work. I can't fit it in here, or something like that.
Oh yeah,
So- so-
definitely. I mean, edits are a necessary evil.
Wow.
I know I'm offending you, Ben, but definitely there's a purpose. Obviously, you need to make sure you're putting out material that's quality and that goes along with it. Where's the original here?
One of the other things that we do at Yen is we don't actually usually send revisions back to the letterer.
Right.
So once they submit the work, we work on it in-house.
Oh, wow.
So that helps us train the individual staff members as well as keep a closer eye on the style and maintain our style, especially when it's the same editor working on from series to series.
And
So.
maybe that keeps the letterers happier with you as well.
Maybe. I mean, we will still go back to them if it's something that's really intense or whatnot, but yeah. That's the way it works.
Yeah, it's
It's a very dynamic process.
Yep.
being
that's not
different
to say that-
across the board makes it pretty interesting too. Whether I'm working with Tanya, working with Ben or Ajani, like it's you get used to working with different people, and that's where your professionalism comes in play. Like if you're easy to work with, that's when you're going to get hired, and hopefully they like me.
Like you, we couldn't live without you, man.
I try. Now this first balloon in panel 2 was actually in a thought balloon, so I italicized that as well, where the editor would have picked that up.
Whoa! Mea culpa. I mean, what Tanya was saying too, it's not, I mean, you make adjustments depending on the demands of the book to a certain extent too. We do the same thing sometimes where if something comes back and it looks a lot different on the page, or if the bubbles are really, really narrow for a certain series, Attack on Titan, we might do more work on it after it's been lettered, because you're absolutely right. I mean, big flowery language does not always fit.
Yeah, actually, I that's what I do too. I mean, it really depends on the book. So not only do I, depending on how it looks, who I'm working with, and when I look at the script and how the book is itself, will I decide if I'm going to edit the script first or just give it straight to letter or time constraints. But I also make sure to check multiple times. So I'm looking at it in the script, I'm checking the translation and seeing how it flows, then I'm getting it back from the letter, and then I'm reading it again that time. I end up reading maybe at least five, 6 different times throughout the book, just to make sure that I'm not missing everything. And as it happens, I do that especially because every time I look at it, there's always something that I catch that I didn't catch in time. So.
At Yen, we actually have at least two different editors take a look at a book. So, it's another new set of eyes kind of thing. So that's the way it works for us.
Right, the part of the process you're not getting to see is the proofreading that
Yes.
occurs after all of this is done, where it goes through, reads by other people who haven't been staring at it for, like Ajani was saying, 5 or 6 times, so that they can contribute and catch mistakes that maybe we've gone numb to because we've been looking at it for so long.
And I just thought of this, and I'm going to forget. So I just want to mention that if you do want to be a translator, also have a thesaurus. Thesauruses are very important in this job. Because,
Definitely.
especially with Japanese, because the same word gets repeated over and over again, but it sounds horrible in English.
Yeah, we don't do that nearly so
Yeah,
much.
so you have to kind of find a way to work around it. And the reason I brought it up is when you're talking about a balloon with a lot of language that you don't have room for, the editor, usually in our case anyway, will spend a lot of time trying to figure out how can I spin this so it says the same thing, but will actually look really good in this balloon. So.
And I actually didn't mention it at the time, but one of the reasons I rewrote the last line is that concentrate is a long word, and if you can avoid giving the letterers long words like that,
It helps.
it does help, because the fewer hyphens on a page, the better.
Yeah. When I first started, one of the biggest things for it was with Tokyo Pop at the time was that we were trying to only break words that were either compound words or if it was a really necessary situation. So I've made that a habit where I try not to break the word as much. Let me take off the underline here. And so you'll find when words like coordination come up, I do use the hyphen, but definitely you want to try to make the balloon fit as best as possible without breaking. And I think this was a long one, and he has the underline, so we want to make that bold. If we take a look at the original, it is actually, kind of this darker, thicker font, which indicates the bold itself. So even if I missed it in the script when I copy-paste over, I reference myself with the original tankobon and use that to kind of guide where I'm going to use bolds or different kind of styles on the font. And I think those are our finished pages.
Cool.
Right?
And the end product ends up looking like this.
Wow.
All right. So next up, we have 3 slides where I just want to show you what a yen spread looks like. It's a little bit different, and Darren's going to pull that up for you. So this is a spread from Black Butler. This is the original spread. You can't actually read it because some of the text is very small. Yeah, it has a cat because there's lots of spoilers, and I didn't want to spoil anything. So you got Sebastian and his love of cats. So here's the original spread, and a couple of things we try to do at Yen is match the same font faces that you're seeing here, which Darren kind of showed you. Black Butler uses a lot more fonts. So now if you want to go to the next one. So, there's another one. Sorry, This is the final edit. This one. So this is raw. So basically, I just did a really rough translation and then dropped in all of the text at the same size. So it looks like a mess, basically. So now if you go over to the final edit, now you can see we matched the fonts. We kind of used, sort of zhuzhed it to our style. The sound effects, we chose to do this way because at the time when we started, Tokyo Pop really didn't translate their sound effects. Sound effects are a huge, huge part of manga. So to leave them completely untouched was a shame. And we opted not to go the Viz route and take out all the sound effects because, as you can see from the Kyun up there, it's basically a work of art. So we didn't want to replace it. So our choice is not for everyone. I admit it, I understand. But a lot of times, just having if we had translated the sound effect to just a sound, it's not immediately apparent because of the differences between Japanese and English. It's not immediately apparent what that sound is referring to. So we went this route, and as you can see, we matched the fonts where Sebastian is, waxing poetic about the cat. We matched the fonts there, and we also, in this book, we attempted to give him a very formal way of talking. He does, if you'll notice, if you read it regularly, he doesn't actually use contractions. That's because he's such a great super respectful butler that he's superhuman. Like he wouldn't be an actual person. So it's just a tiny thing. You might never even notice it, but we feel like that, it's just those little things that really make, you don't notice what we do, but it's gonna make the character come much more alive. And over there, where you see this will not go very far toward filling your belly, this is actually, it has 2 dots next to it in the original. So we try to, as Darren was talking about, keep the integrity of the original. So we emphasize only what the author wants to emphasize. So this is pretty much Black Butler, the spread from Black Butler. You can see a little bit of our style, and that's about it.
So we have a few minutes left for some questions from the audience, if you have them. There are staff with microphones. If you could please wait for them to reach you. So I see this woman here in the 5th or 6th row.
Hello? Hi. Basically, okay. So if I really wanted to become a translator, basically where would I begin? I have personally some translating background, this and that, but since I know most of it is freelance, and even if I'm on Google Maps looking up where's the HQ for example, Yen Press or whatever, sometimes it'll be in a completely out-of-state place. I'm not really sure how this application process goes, where to begin. Could you please, give me some information on that?
Well, for both of us, I think most of our translators are freelance, so it doesn't matter where you are, you don't have to come to the office. Find the email on our websites, contact us, get in touch. If we're at an event like this, come talk to us, pass us your business card, tell us what you're interested in. That's pretty much the beginning.
There is a reception after this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let me just add, though, that you can get in touch with us, but please be patient because we're very, very overworked and rushed all the time. Yeah. So if we don't get back to you like tomorrow, give us some time, follow up, and we will get back to you eventually.
I'm sorry, do you think it's possible to do a full-time job and freelancing?
Yeah.
If you really want to make it work, yeah. You have to be really committed, though. Like, you have to not care that you're going to go home and spend another potentially 3 or 4 hours redoing work that needed to be redone. So it is a big commitment. It's not to be underestimated. Yeah. But yeah, email us a resume and a cover letter, and we like to see sample work too, with the understanding, like Tania said, there might not be opportunities for a while.
We have. I'm not sure. Yes, it's kind of hard to see.
Hi, thank you for having us here with you today. I was just wondering, in terms of the original creators, how much communication do you have with them, either at Kodansha's editors, Kodansha Japan's editors, or even the original author, and how much do they contribute to considering the final translation, especially because they probably do not understand the language and how we might interpret it in our own culture?
That's a great question.
Some insight on that.
In manga, pretty much no one is in regular contact with the original creator other than the Japanese editor. They are usually the conduit of communication with the author. And the author might come in periodically, usually to approve stuff, if there's merchandise or whatever involvement they might have with the anime. But typically, that's the person who's in regular touch with them, and that holds true for us too. We don't have much contact directly with the original author. However, there are various degrees of involvement that the original author has in the English translation. Something that, a lot of them, like you said, they don't speak English, so they might delegate that entire task to us. But there have been people who do want to be involved. For example, on A Silent Voice, the original author didn't want the word deaf used. For those of you who may not have read that series, it's about a girl who can't hear, who's in elementary school with a boy who bullies her. And the story is told from a perspective of the bully, actually, and how he comes to terms with his behavior. And it explains without excusing that in a really interesting way. But she didn't want the word deaf used to describe this girl. She, except in very specific circumstances, like if it was being used as part of bullying her. And then, even then, only very, very sparingly. So we actually eliminated it from the cover copy on the back of the book because of that. We were very, very careful because of that. So there are certain things that can be very important to the author, and we do our best to accommodate them, of course.
There's a woman here in the...
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. I was especially pleased to see, and actually quite surprised to see the English versions of Jellyfish Princess come out. Being pretty familiar with the raw version of that manga, I was like, I have no idea how they're going to translate all of the Japanese pop culture references, and I just couldn't understand it, and you found out a way to make it work. And I was wondering, second season, Hozuki no Reitets, just came out, or is going to be coming out in the fall, I believe. It does have a pretty decent following, but once again, there's a lot of not only Japanese pop cultural references and historical references that it seems as though a lot of Western readers wouldn't get. So my question to you is, are you more likely to just leave the original reference and sometimes even idiom untranslated and then have a footnote at the bottom? Or will you change a character like, I don't know, Yamada Yu, or a reference to like Yamada Yu or something to like Britney Spears or something like that?
Well, I think we don't do that last one, but Ajani, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I especially do not like doing that. I think it's important to... some things are just not very easy to translate, and if it were for like children or something like that, then I would be more willing to do something like that. One thing I didn't particularly like, but I understood, was like I brought this up with colleagues before for Crayon Shin-Chan, that in the version that was translated here, they had on the wall like a poster of Ayumi Hamasaki, and then they put Britney Spears. But I can understand if you're trying to get this for kids, or things like Doraemon, what they did with that for Disney, how they translated that. It makes sense. So it is. But for Kodansha, generally, we want to provide as much context and give people insight into the culture behind everything, because just because there may be a word that translates one-to-one doesn't mean that it has that same significance. So where possible, we want to preserve the Japanese culture in there, and then have a translation notes. I think for Kodansha, that's one of the things that makes Kodansha Comics what they are. So we always try to include in translation notes where possible.
I think we have time for one more question. Here in the front, this gentleman, if you could get the microphone to him.
I think one of you said that manga started taking off in the United States in the early 2000s, and I'm just wondering, was there a specific occurrence or circumstance that generated that? And then along with that, is the market still growing significantly or leveling off, or how do you see it happening over the next couple of years?
Well, I said that, and Kurt Hassler, who's our publishing director and VP, he was the buyer at Borders back then, and he brought manga into all the Borders stores. So he likes to take credit for the giant boom in manga. And since he's not here, I'll do it for him. So manga did really good in the early 2000s, and then we experienced a slump with the closing of Borders, which took out any number of smaller manga publishers. And it was like that for a while, but nowadays there's a definite rise. Graphic novels, the group, or the what's the word? Category of graphic novels is actually one of the only, if not the only, growing part of publishing right now. So we're doing great. It's the reason we're publishing, like, I think this year, Yen is going to publish around 350 or 360 volumes. That includes our light novels as well as our manga. But yeah, we're doing great. So we're only hoping, and I think the fact that we're willing to sort of go, be more forward-thinking as publishers now is also helping the growth and the direction we're going in.
Yeah, really expanding into different genres that we might not have explored as aggressively before. Yeah. And you're able to do that because of the solid growth. I mean, and when Tanya's talking about growth, like rock solid.
Yeah.
2014, graphic novels grew 20%. 2015, graphic novels grew 20%. And then last year, I think it was like 16 or something like that.
That's wonderful.
There is no other category in publishing like that, even remotely. And manga has outpaced graphic novels, actually, if you just look at manga. Yeah, so we're not anywhere near the sales levels of the height of the mid-2000s, but the category is healthy and growing, and I think everyone is a little bit wiser now. And,
We have our fingers in all different pies.
Yeah.
So
It's really
if
exciting.
one
Yeah.
thing doesn't work, there are other avenues to explore. So.
Even if, like, for example, with Kodansha, we had a huge hit with Attack on Titan. So we've actually started looking at our sales numbers without our Attack on Titan books. Like, we deeply care about Attack on Titan, and we track our numbers with Attack on Titan as well, of course. But it's also really interesting to look at the sales numbers over the years without any of the Attack on Titan in it. And if you do that, you can see organic, widespread growth across the whole catalog, which is incredibly heartening. And all of that is thanks to people like the people here who are picking up the books and reading them and discussing them passionately. So we thank you very much for that.